Okay, for today's Zen Business Class, based on the Gold Coast, we have the founder and CEO of Me Media, Mr. Chris Hogan. Mate, thanks for joining me.
G'day, Simon. Thanks for having me, mate.
It's a bit of a Gold Coast special today. We had Andrew Hawkes on the show earlier. He's based on the GC as well, which is the Gold Coast for those that are playing at home. And he talked about journaling, so I'm looking forward to backing it up with Chris Hogan.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's exciting to finally be on here with you because I know we've spoken a lot about it. So,
Speaking of Andrew, I started the interview with a question, and that is, if you had one word to sum up how you're feeling about life or business right now, what would that be?
creative.
Creative. Yeah, nice. And I thought I'd just take a moment to just explain why I asked that question. And I think now more than ever is important to check in with how we're feeling emotionally, what our current emotional state is. And quite often we're not aware of how we're actually feeling. We just keep charging on, keep trucking on. And the purpose of feelings and emotions is to be felt, to feel them, to let them pass through. And so it's just a great practice for people to ask each other and themselves, how am I feeling right now? What's my current state? And just feeling it, let it pass through, be aware of it, then you could respond to it as opposed to keep working over the top of it. So I did ask that question twice today, so I just thought I'd better explain the intention or the purpose behind why I asked that question. And speaking of purpose, great segue. Do you see that? Straight into purpose-led marketing, which is what you're going to talk about today. So what is purpose-led marketing?
Simon, I think we have to take a step backwards and discover why we need a purpose. And a purpose inspires us, motivates us to be of service to others and basically stop looking inward and looking outward. And when we do that, I guess it lights us up a little because we don't focus on our own problems, we focus on someone else's. And then when we assist somebody else with their problems, it creates a chemical response within ourselves, oxytocin, that one of the happiness hormones, and then that breeds serotonin and dopamine, and it lights us up. So having a purpose really lights us up. And then when we bring that back to marketing, well, your purpose lights up your content. We're a content marketing agency here at Me Media, and so we create a lot of content. And what's really interesting is that because we're doing that on behalf of clients, we have to get into their mind, their persona, when we create that content. And in order to do that, when we're chopping and changing, we basically have to read a script almost, or adopt our client's purpose and values. And then, take a moment to digest that and feel those values, feel that emotion behind the purpose and create the content, whether it's text, video, infographics, etc. So their purpose really inspires the content creation. And then it also inspires you to, discover who it is you're going to market to. So I can talk on this quite a lot, but essentially, purpose inspires us and motivates us to be of service to others, and that means that when we're purpose-led, we're effectively market-led.
Right.
And that means that we appeal a lot more to our ideal client.
Yeah, so you're talking really it's an altruistic purpose. It's something greater than the individual, something greater than oneself. That's what you're really creating here, isn't it?
It is, but I think altruism has had, I guess, a negative bag associated with it, because most people who are being altruistic are forgetting the fact that they need to make a profit. You can't actually serve your altruistic purpose if you're not making a profit. You put yourself out of business.
it's very much an and conversation. It's not a self-sacrifice, fall on the sword. Hey, let's do everything for everybody else, and not worry about me. Because I think it you're right. It did go the other way. It's like it was profit, 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 and then it was like, well, it's all about altruism, all about the why. It's all about the purpose for others. But it's finding that beautiful balance between the art and science, the giving and the receiving. And I know my coach Lorna talks about in the new paradigm, it's self before others rather than self instead of others. And often we make the distinction of it's got to be one or the other. You're either doing it for somebody else or you're doing it for yourself. That real duality play, which is pretty standard across human beings. Now, how do you distinguish or determine one's purpose if someone's never done this exercise before? Let's say we've got some listeners in here that entrepreneurs, small business owners that have never actually distinguished, and I am assuming that it's both a personal purpose as well as a company purpose. You divide the two up there, is that correct?
Absolutely. So what I was saying before, yes, you do have to come back to yourself. And when we go through this, normally in a workshop scenario, we look inward and discover our own values. So we start with values first. And by looking at values, that's actually the name of the method that we use. We look at who inspired us when we were growing up. Essentially, our formidable years are from 0 to 8, according to the science. But really, we're still growing our value set right up until the age of around 15, 16 even. So it's who inspired us during that time, who we admired most during that time of those formidable years, and looking at their values. So, for example, it was my father for me. Mm-hmm. Okay. I went, right, so what were his values? Well, he was big on respect. He was big on hard work and integrity. He loved making memories. We would always be going camping. He was always big on making sure, he made memories for his children. He was a protector, and a provider. So he, made sure he had food on the table, and yeah, I had older sisters, so you don't need to say too much about protection there. And funnily enough, I have 3 daughters now, so it's flowed through from my father. And my father's passed, so I don't have a chance to actually ask him this. So I've had to just think about it quite a lot. And then I help my clients and my workshop attendees go through the same process.
Okay, so it's really about distinguishing one's personal values. And then, as we know, the fish always rots from the head. So it's, as the leaders of organizations, it's having those values filter through the organization consistent with. Now, does that then start to be consistent with a company's core values? Is that the purpose behind that?
Yeah, so when we do the workshop scenario, we have the leader, the founder, the CEO in the room. And then what's great is to have other stakeholders in the room, and everybody do this individually. And then compare notes. Yes, the fish rots from the head. So essentially, they should be leading people through their own value set, but it needs to resonate with everybody else as well. It can't be, I guess,
like a dictatorship, really. Like, you will henceforth believe in my values and operate consistently with those.
Exactly. So not everybody's going to have exactly the same value set. Absolutely not. But I think that it's very easy to compromise or find similarities or adopt other people's values, that you admire. Like I was just saying before.
And would that just be maybe limited to, say, the core founding team as opposed to, the entire team?
No, I say key stakeholders, but
Right.
I mean that people who are influential in the company. You could have the workshop, maintenance person or cleaner or whatever be influential in the company because their daily activity might require them to interact with a multitude of people in the company. And they could be a sounding board for a lot of the problems that are going on in the company. So their insight could be highly valuable when it comes to discovering the values and the purpose of a company.
So it's really the key stakeholders slash influencers of an organization. What are their values? How are they going to operate? Because as we know from the filters model, which we've talked about on this show before, there's 4 layers of context or 4 filters: current emotional experience, beliefs, then values at a deeper level. We're quite often blind or less aware of our values as we are of our beliefs from a conscious awareness perspective, but they do drive behavior so profoundly. And to be able to identify those and to go through the process to be able to identify the values. Do you use any, or have you used any of Dr. John Demartini's work or framework to distinguish values in the past?
No, to be honest, this is most of my own work.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I had some challenges, through my late 30s and some personal challenges. Wasn't diagnosed as depression, but, it could have been. And I had to, I guess, find myself, for want of a better term. And just started, I guess, doing some work, doing a lot of reading. So I guess there could have been a lot of books and whatnot that inspired me. I do know of several that I think are great reading, but none of them, I guess, gave me a framework to work through. And had I spoken to a psychologist or something like that, I imagine I would have had a framework or come up with one. So I effectively created my own. And that's why I say we go back to those people in our lives who we admire and respect and discover what their values are or were while we were growing up. And that makes it so much easier because ask me a question about myself, I can't answer it. Ask me a question about somebody else and I can, it's like, I can write a whole list. And then you go, well, yeah, of course I have those values, and so that process has been, for want of a better term, very valuable for me and clients and workshop attendees that I've gone through this process with. It's actually lit them up. Like,
yeah, I can imagine.
I've seen the change in people, especially when you're going through this and you just feel like you're hitting a brick wall or you're running on a treadmill or you're ready to throw the towel in. This process actually lights you up. It inspires you. It makes you want to get out there and go harder.
Yeah, it's really good, Chris. Yeah, really good. And it's beautiful because it ties in with having those core values be consistent across the entire organization and filter into the marketing to make sure that there's authenticity. And I remember when authenticity was the buzzword back when you and I first got together, and we used to run the Attract and Convert seminars, which were fantastic. And we talked about authenticity, and that's what I'm really hearing in this purpose-led marketing is getting to the core values of the organization and then having that filter through the team to ensure that they're operating consistently with it, and then through the marketing so that when people see the marketing message or experience the marketing message is probably the more accurate term, that they're also then experiencing a team that's consistent with that message. So there's not that disconnect, which we quite often feel with organizations when they portray to be one thing and then your experience of an interaction is something else completely different.
Yeah, and our teams change. I've been building marketing teams for over 13 years, 14 years, something like that. And And so my team has changed, constantly. And when a team changes, you need to be able to say to them, hey, we need some consistency through our content creation. Read this first, adopt those values, that emotion and behind that purpose, and ensure that we're continuing to create the content, on purpose.
Beautiful. Now, purpose. Purpose is, you've got an acronym, which Andrew Hawks also had an acronym. He had the acronym of MEDS earlier on in the show, which is meditation, exercise, daily journaling, and strategizing, which I loved. Your P is the first letter of your proactive marketing approach. So maybe, and I'd love to get you back on the show through other Zen Business classes to complete the acronym as we go through. So run me through what proactive stands for.
Okay, so yes, our proactive method is effectively a 9-step method. So you've got 9 letters in proactive. So P stands for purpose and values. Great. R is for research. O is for opportunity. A, audience. C, create. Where are we up to? T, turn on. I, ignite. V, verification and validation. And E is about evolution, so evolve.
I love it because it's easy to remember. It's a 9-step process. I love it when a plan comes together and you're able to get an acronym out of it. I'm sure there was a little bit of jiggling in there, but it's just an easy way of remembering the 9 essential steps of marketing there.
Yeah, the most questionable one in there is turn on. That was the hardest one. I couldn't find any other word to suit that, but
it works.
About that one is that your distribution, that's what turn on is all about, and it doesn't necessarily mean in today's age that you need to stick with what everybody else is doing or the going trends. For example, it doesn't always mean digital. It doesn't, it may not mean traditional. So
of course.
It's a highly flexible method, which it's very strategic in nature.
Awesome. I'd love to chat with you for ages and ages and ages because I love your work, Chris. Always have. We've been working together for probably 8 or 9 years now, off and on, and collaborating on projects. So it's always a pleasure to be in your presence. Mate, thanks for being on the show, and thank you for the great work that you do with your clients and small businesses of Australia, but I really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. And just to add, the book is coming out soon. It's expected to be published later this year, Building Brands on Purpose. So
Perfect. I can't believe I forgot to give it a plug. Mate, thanks for bringing. It's a shame. It's a hard gig when you've got to give your own plug of the book, mate. I apologise.
It's all right, mate. I've been in your seat plenty of times. So
Totally. And I'm homeschooling today. Trying to record a podcast. It's pretty full on mid-lockdown for right now. So it's all happening. All happening.
Love your work too. Love your work too, Simon. I think all of the topics that you're covering at the moment are very pertinent to the timing and the challenges that we're going through. I'm really looking forward to listening to the journaling one. So,
thanks, Chris. Thanks for being on the show.
Cheers, mate.